everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Yadi and this is Yadi Angel Art. Today, I'm going to share with you guys some tips about things that I avoid when battling art block. And then at the very end, I'll also share with you guys my go-to sketch prompt ideas. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to very quickly give you guys this disclaimer that the things that I avoid when I'm trying to get over art block are things that I've noticed are hindering to me because of who I am as a person and how my mind works. Some of these things, if you're already doing them and they work for you, that's totally fine. I'm not saying, stop what you're doing, it's wrong or anything like that. I'm just going to be sharing some things I've noticed that don't work for me. Alright, so let's get into this. The first thing that I try to avoid when I've got art block is scrolling through social media for inspiration. Now, I think all of us at some point have heard this advice of not getting sucked into social media, but what I used to tell myself before though is that, oh, this is being productive. I'm going onto social media for inspiration, and once I scroll through a little bit, I'll be able to come up with something to draw. In theory, that doesn't sound terrible, right? But a lot of us have been on social media before, and so you probably know, why that doesn't work so well. But it took me quite a while to realize that I was losing a lot of time scrolling through, and I was also starting to feel very dejected, and it ended up making me even more sad because I felt like I've got this art block, I already am having trouble drawing, and now I'm looking at all this beautiful artwork that other people have been able to draw, and now I feel even less motivated to draw. Now, something that I do instead of that is I do have some images saved on my Instagram or on Pinterest and stuff for references, and I will sometimes go onto there and pull up my references and use that to kind of battle my art block. I just have to be super careful because just pulling up that social media is going to be distracting, so I have to be very strict with myself. If I'm going to be pulling up these references, then that's what I'm going on there to do, not to scroll. The next thing we're going to talk about that I tend to avoid are doodles. This might be a little controversial because a lot of people tend to do doodles when they can't draw anything else, and it just has never worked for me. Well, we can pretty much say almost anything is a doodle, but for the most part, doodles tend to be something that you draw when you're being absent-minded or when you're doing other things. And for me, I can't really do multiple things at once. It's just me as a person. I'm horrible at multitasking. So doodles for me have never really worked, in part because I always need to be focused on my artwork, and my doodles have never come out well because of that. I also have a hard time drawing without at least a little bit of a direction or a little bit of an idea, and that never felt to me like that was the spirit of doodling, right? You're supposed to just draw whatever, your hand just should do its own thing, right? If I'm crazy or wrong about this, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments down below. But for me, I've always felt that doodling never really helped me with my art block, and I just don't feel like much of a doodler. Is that a word? I don't feel like I'm very good at doodling. Instead of doodles, I actually have that small list of things that I was going to share with you at the end of this video, so I'll just talk about that a bit later. The next thing that I avoid is my full complicated painting process. Now, when I tackle a painting, I go through a lot of steps before I actually get to painting. I could see myself seriously doing a painting in at least 3 days, but it's other paintings have taken me longer too, of course. Some people paint for like months and stuff. But yeah, so that process is a lot, and if it sounded at all interesting to you, I could always break everything down much more in a separate video and kind of walk you through my whole process. But yeah, that process is a lot. Just thinking about that process while I've got art block scares me away from the paper. So I do my very best mentally to like not even think about that process and to avoid it completely, because that's not going to help me fill up that empty page. Instead, some things I do to help me get over that stress is I try to loosen my hand with my sketches, and I just try to be very simple with my sketches, not too many details if I'm not feeling it. And yeah, I also don't really do any color picking or any extra thought behind my choices in my sketchbook at this point. The next thing that I avoid are large canvases or my official watercolor paper. Anything that has even like the smallest bit of pressure to do well on it, I completely avoid it. And I've never been super comfortable with like large spaces to draw on. I'm still kind of working on that. So if I'm already struggling with art block, I get as small as I physically can with my paper. I have my 2 traditional go-to pads that I love. The one is watercolor paper and the other is just the sketchbook, and they're my absolute favorite. And then if I'm doing something digital, I will just pull up my canvas and I'll zoom in super tight onto the corner and I'll do my little sketch. And if I'm feeling that sketch really well, then I'll zoom it back out and make the sketch big and I'll turn that into a piece. But otherwise, I just like stay as small as I can with all of my sketches. And that really helps to like relieve me of that perfectionist stress. So finally, on my list of things I avoid, this point might be another one that's a bit controversial. I know certainly there's people who aren't like me in this way, but for me, we talked about this earlier, right? So I said I can't multitask. So I avoid music with lyrics or podcasts when I'm in this state of art block. It's just distracting for me and it doesn't really help me creatively get past this. At least I've noticed, for me, that's how my mind works. So if I need some sound, I'll look up lo-fi music or just any instrumental calming sounds that I can just play in the background to just try and keep myself chill and try and get over that art block. That's really what works more so for me. I know other people are not like this. I know music is like a big thing for other artists. It's just not great for me when I'm trying to get out of art block. Okay, so those were all of the things that I avoid when I'm trying to get over my art block. I hope they were of some help to you. And next, we are going to talk about my go-to sketch prompt ideas. My first suggestion would be the blobs challenge. There might be another official way to call this. I've seen this prompt a lot, and it actually is really helpful to kind of get out of your head a little bit. But if you haven't heard of this before, you basically just put blobs of watercolor or marker or whatever you've got on hand, just blobs of color onto a paper, and then take a pen and just draw out the shapes that you see in those blobs. It's a fun little exercise to do to get a good warm-up, or it's really nice to do when you're, struggling with art block. It kind of takes the guesswork out of shapes for you, in a way, if that makes sense. And it's a really good way to get out of your head, too. Next, one of my go-to prompts is to do some sort of study. It can be something more realistic, or it can be something more stylistic. And what I mean by that is that it can be a certain style that I've never tried before, or that I really look up to and want to try to bring into my own style. So it's still kind of a study, but not of something more realistic, more so of a certain style maybe that I see a different artist doing that I'd really like to try. Here I kind of did a little bit more line work, because I've been kind of wanting to play around with line thickness in my art pieces, so I thought that would be a cool little practice. The next thing I would recommend would be to sketch either your pet or your family or something around you. So use like a live reference. That's always helpful because you're left with less decision making. Just whatever your eye lands on, try that. The next suggestion I have would be kind of doing like a visual journal. And this sounds a lot fancier than like what it actually is, or even what it started out as. The way this idea started out for me was because I would get very frustrated by the time I would get to this point with my art block. Nothing would be going right for me anymore at this point, and I have no idea what else to do, so I ended up drawing those frustrations into little characters. So a lot of these characters are like frustrated or angry, and I can tell like, was really struggling by that point, huh? But that prompt turned into this idea of drawing your emotions, or drawing anything that happened to you recently or that day that you want to practice sketching out or want to just like save forever. So here I did a little sketch of a walk in this tunnel that I did recently. There was just like a cute like bike path next to a river, and we went under a tunnel that was covered in like red leaf vines, and it was so pretty. And there were murals throughout the like different tunnels. It was just a really nice experience, and I thought that would be a nice little thing to visually capture as a journal. My final sketch prompt idea would be to use your go-to comfort zone. Whatever you tend to go to when you just want to draw something that makes you happy or that you feel more comfortable drawing, just do that. And for me, that's worked the best. If nothing else works, at least that's always been one of the best things to do. Yeah, for me, I like to draw girls in frilly skirts, so that's my go-to, but it's different for every artist, and it's mostly just important to regain that confidence that you might have lost through all of this art block, and that's a really good way to help with that. So those were my tips for things that I avoid when fighting art block, and those were my sketch prompt ideas. And my hope for this video is that you were able to take some ideas from this to incorporate into your own art block routines. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you had a good time with me, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'm really curious, are there any things that you avoid when you're stuck in that art block? What are your go-to sketch prompts? Let me know in the comments down below. And I will see you guys next Saturday with the next video.